Our photographs go out into the world carrying within them the only words that we will be able to say to the ones who eventually read those photographs. In his book, Photographically Speaking, American photographer David Duchemin says, "It only takes one person to express an idea, but takes two people to communicate." That is, you may wish to express something in a photograph, but there is always a second person involved, the viewer, and what they see may be entirely different to what you want to express. Obviously, the closer these two come together, the closer you have come to communicating what you want to express. My original photographs from this project, an example shown here, just weren't doing that, and I needed to find another layer to add some more expression and further engage the viewer. Of course, we were in 2020 and things were about to change. Who would have thought that 2020 would be such a strange year? Shortly after the start of the Sustainable Prospects module, Melbourne's second wave of COVID-19 forced the city into a harsh lockdown, with all non-essential businesses, including bars, cafes and restaurants, closed. Severe travel restrictions were imposed, together with curfews at night time. Home visits, even from family members, were banned, and police roadblocks were set up to make sure that people adhered to these new regulations. The subjects for my project have mostly been people that I'd met over a coffee or a beer, so of course that was out of the question, and I now had to find other ways to keep busy. The introduction to this module encourages us to become involved in different aspects of photography, from helping out at studios, to entering competitions, and where possible exhibiting our work. Fortunately, I had a permit to travel to work, so I could photograph the empty streets of Melbourne, both by day and night. One of these photographs, titled COVID Desolation, was entered into a competition, and was one of a handful of photographs chosen for an outdoor exhibition. Other photographs were put to good use for the story in week 5 of the module. My project, however, was at a standstill. I'd mentioned during one of the webinars that I was on the verge of giving up on the project completely and going in a complete different direction. But the interest for the project did remain, and I decided to press on with it, using the time to research others who had done similar projects. I came across an exhibition at the Monash Gallery of Art, where the gallery had commissioned photographer Lee Grant to explore and document residents who migrated to Australia and settled in the area. Grant photographed his 16 subjects in an environmental portrait style, either in their home or standing outside in front of their home. Grant's images, however, did nothing for me. They did not stand out in any way. But then, thinking back to my original images, nor did mine, I was very unsatisfied with the look and feel of my images. One of the artists I looked at for inspiration was Taryn Simon, with her MoMA exhibition, A Living Man Declared Dead, which contains numerous images of people on plain backgrounds, not too dissimilar to my own. Among my growing pile of Australian photography books was a book by Kate Gollings called The Australians, probably the closest that I'd seen so far to what I was imagining. Gollings photographed 100 significant Australians. The photographs ranged in style from formal studio shots through to unposed candid environmental portraits, each accompanied by a short story about the subject. An interesting book, but for my own work I still needed to find something different, something to set them apart. I tried converting to black and white. I tried putting the subject into their place of work. I even tried removing the sign, as it was suggested in one of my webinars that anyone seeing my pictures, anyone holding a sign, would be immediately reminded of Gillian Waring's series. In desperation and with nothing left to explore, I asked my tutor, Laura Hind, to tell me about her own work, her series Lady into Hut. She told me about the challenges behind the work, how she'd had to throw away everything that she knew about photography, and suggested perhaps I do the same, to write down all that I usually do and just throw it away. Of course, the answer was staring right at me. On the shelf next to me was a photograph by Magnum photographer Thomas Hopker, a double exposure of Andy Warhol, and just below that a book by the fantastic Sam Haskins called Photographics, containing numerous double exposures. Sam's images in the book were produced in the darkroom, either by combining negatives or by printing images on top of each other, in a similar way to the way we use Photoshop these days to combine images. Coincidentally, I just recently produced an image in Photoshop showing how we felt about wearing masks during COVID. On the outside we appeared to be calm, yet on the inside we just wanted to rip the mask off. Looking at these images, I thought, there's my answer, a double exposure. I've found when photographing my subjects, when they're speaking about Australia now, they tend to look straight at the camera. But when I ask them to tell me about their early years here, or their parents, or their home cities, they tend either to look away or certainly to change their expression. I thought if I could combine these two expressions into one image, I'd have what I was after. Something to hold the viewer's attention, something to engage the viewer more, something to get them to ask more questions. The next thing to do was to bring back the sign. I met Lou in the pub and he told me how he was born in Australia, how he grew up here and how he loved the country, but at the same time how it was so difficult in the early years, being the Greek in Australia. Jacqueline's reaction was entirely different to what I'd expected. She told me how she'd been born in Australia, but laughed when she told me that she'd been conceived in Austria. Her mother was pregnant on the flight over and she'd been born 3 weeks after her mother's arrival. Looking at these photographs, I think I've found something unique, something that certainly in my research I've not seen before. Every person I speak to has a different story. Every story brings up new questions. My next step is to approach the curator at the Immigration Museum and see if I can take this even further. I'll certainly be pursuing this path though for the next module.